What up, it's Dane, and in this video I'm going to be telling you how to deal with hunger when intermittent fasting, and I guarantee you was wrong. I guarantee you was wrong. I guarantee we're doing it wrong. And in this video I'm going to be telling you how to do intermittent fasting exactly right, and just how to depress or whatever hunger, right? You don't want any hunger, right? So that's the objective of this video, how to deal with hunger when intermittent fasting. And when done right, when all these tips are implicated, it works 100%. Trust me on this. Trust me, daddy. Okay, so let's get straight into it. So number one is macronutrient, right? So macronutrients, in fact. So carbs, protein, fats. When intermittent fasting, I recommend you just concentrate on your protein, right? Your protein intake is probably going to be the most important macronutrient of them all. And we all know protein in the fitness industry. So yes, let's concentrate on the protein intake. For protein intake, probably 1.3 grams of protein per pound of body weight should be a good accurate measure, just to maintain muscle mass. Of course, if we're in a caloric deficit, it's harder to build muscle mass. But that's another video, so I won't get too much into that. But step number one, how to deal with hunger when intermittent fasting, is concentrating on protein intake. And the reason why I always kind of recommend a higher protein intake is because, if you don't know already, protein intake provides satiety way more than carbohydrates do, right? So that's why when you have a big piece of steak, it fills you up way more than a lot of pasta, right? So that's just a good example to illustrate for those of you who have basic knowledge of nutrition, that protein does fill you up for a lot longer and it takes longer to digest, right? Same with vegetables. For the calories it has, it'll fill you up way more than carbs, right? But like I said, step number one, macronutrients. Concentrate more on your protein intake than anything else. You don't really need to worry about checking your carbs and fats. In my opinion, I'll just let them free flow. As long as you hit your caloric intake that you need to lose weight, and your protein intake, you should be all fine. Because one common mistake, and this happens all the time when intermittent fasting, is people cut out the carbs as well. Like, they don't have any carbs, and that means the performance in the gym is going to go down. You're going to likely lose some strength and some muscle mass. So we don't want that. Concentrate on protein and then your daily intake. That's one tip and the first step to reduce hunger when intermittent fasting. So tip number two, and this is real important, listen up here. If you get anything from the video, this is so important. All the other tips are real helpful, but I guess this one is the most important one. So tip number two is, don't mistake dehydration for hunger, right? What I mean by this is, in the morning, like, you might get even a half an hour, not even immediately. Say half an hour's gone and you start feeling the stomach rumbling and all shit like that, oh, I'm hungry now, gotta eat. That's basically telling you you're dehydrated, right? You need to drink water. And research has shown this. This is not just me like making up some bullshit story. I have only looked at one study that research has shown this, so I'm not saying this is like 100% true. I probably believe it is because it makes so much common sense. Like, when I'm hungry, or when anyone's hungry, and I just tell them drink a lot of water, you're dehydrated, man, and they drink loads of water, then all of a sudden the hunger subsides. So you tell me if that's right or wrong. So anyway, drink loads and loads of water when you wake up. And in fact, after this video, I'm going to be drinking loads of water, but I don't know why I'm telling you that. So step number one was macronutrients, focusing on protein intake, and step number two is drink lots and lots of water. Step number three, this is a very interesting one, and if you don't use this one, I'm not like we said, I'm not actually advertising this shit or anything or just chatting bullshit. If you don't use tip number three, it's actually going to be very hard to stay satisfied throughout the day without constantly thinking about food, right? So tip number three is drink black coffee. Black coffee is a suppressant, appetite suppressant, and if you don't drink black coffee, man, you're gonna struggle. You're gonna have these thoughts on cookies, all sorts of shit. So black coffee, if you don't like black coffee, you could drink green tea or all those herbal teas. But what I'm gonna say is, do not add sugar, milk, anything. You still no calories, right, until you had that first meal. So those are great for appetite suppressants. Tip number four, what was tip number four? Oh yeah, you can drink sodas with low sugars, or flavored water. That's really good as well, because some people get tired of drinking water. So just put like flavoring in of no calories, no sugar, stuff like that. So you still have no sugar, right? You just switching things up a bit to make it more interesting, add some variety. So that's a really good tip as well. Having like diet-free sodas, no calories, and some flavoring in your water, right? I think that was tip number 4. Yeah, and now tip number 5. This is so important, and this links in with the coffee, right? And this is one of the few tips I put in my free intermittent fasting plan report on my website. And this tip number 5, I think we're on, is fruit. It sounds so stupid, right? And you're like, oh wait, now we're consuming calories, right? Fruit is basically used just to starve off hunger again, right? It just replenishes all the glycogen in the liver. Not all of it, but replenishes the glycogen in the liver. So you're not, like I say, you're not going to be as hungry, right? So what I do recommend though is when you eat fruit, eat one piece of fruit and don't eat another one immediately, right? Let it digest a little bit, say like 10, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And then if you're really still hungry, then you can maybe have another piece. Mainly I recommend probably apples as my number 1 because they take a bit longer to eat than the normal ones, and I like apples. So yeah, that's why, but that's just my opinion though. So I think we're on step number 6, or tip number 6, the last step. And this is, I'm saying all these steps are important because they are. Like if you don't incorporate all of these tips, intermittent fasting just becomes more and more difficult and you will get hungry, right? So tip number 6 is, and this is very important, stay productive and active, right? So if you're just laying in bed watching a movie, doing nothing on your computer, you're likely going to think, oh, food, because you're doing nothing, right? If you're like at work and you're always on the move, you're always doing something, then you like, let's use an example. Yesterday I woke up at 8 AM, only ate at 6 PM, right? I'm bulking. That wasn't very good because my protein synthesis is shit. Protein synthesis, and that wasn't like up during the day because I had no protein during the day, blah 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 blah. But that's another video. What I'm basically saying is I went from 8 AM to 6 PM only having my first meal, not because I didn't want to, I wanted to eat, but I was always on the move. I went to one stop, one place. So yeah, it just shows you being productive takes your mind off food as well. And when I did go around, I always made sure to have, I had 4 liters of water on me, so I had water. So anyway, yeah, those are the six top tips on I could say deal with hunger when intermittent fasting. But just before I end the video, like I said, tip number 6, always being productive, is very common sense. If you do nothing in your life, if you're bored, all that good shit when you're very young, bored, I can't remember the last time I said that, but that's when you're going to start thinking about food. So even do housework, do anything to get your mind off food, and that's how you're going to deal with hunger when intermittent fasting. So anyway, I hope I made this video short and concise, informative, and all these tips work for me and I'm sure they're going to work for you. So I hope this video helped you so you stop doing intermittent fasting wrong as well. As always, make sure to follow me on all social media platforms if you like my shit, and be sure to stay positive, stay smiling, and I'll see you in the next one.